What furthers this connection back in Revelation chapter 10 with the divine being, or with God's characteristics, is that he's described as having a face like the sun. Which, of course, is just suggesting, it's bright, it's shining, it's radiant. But when have we kind of seen this phrase already in Revelation? His face was like the sun.
The Son of Man.
At the Son of Man. In chapter 1, when the Son of Man appears to John to give him his commission, his face is radiant like the sun. But there's also another interesting passage connected with this, and this is Matthew chapter 17, verse 2. Now, Matthew 17, verse 2 is in the context of Jesus' transfiguration. So he goes up the mountain with Peter, James, and John, is transfigured before them, and Moses and Elijah appear. But the passage that's really interesting is verse 2. He was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun. And so in two cases here we have this, the statement of Jesus' face shining like the sun. Suggesting that this being, it's blinding to look at this being. The radiance, the power, the light. Furthermore, his legs are like pillars of fire. Now, is there a connection here to, again, the Son of Man vision from chapter 1? Chapter 1, verse 15 talks about the Son of Man having his feet like burnished bronze, or bronze that's gone through the fire. Maybe, and some people have suggested that, it might be stretching it too much. I mean, there's a difference between feet and legs, having appearance of bronze and having an appearance of fire. Right? So, I mean, there might be some similarity there might not be. So what does this symbol, when you hear or you see legs like pillars of fire, what do you think of? What's it representing about this angel? Liar, pants on fire. Okay, so that maybe there's something about this angel's power of purification or destruction. What else?
Just the idea of the pillars of fire, and you can think of the Exodus. So it could be just a visual representation of leading him.
Yeah, God's protective and guiding presence, right? And so maybe it is connected there to the Exodus. And so we have here the rainbow, the sun, the pillar of fire. All of it kind of seems to suggest God's power, God's promise, God's presence. We might even say God's faithfulness, right? The rainbow and the covenant, the sun. The things the sun provides, and then the guidance of the pillars of fire. And that's kind of, in a sense, implicit in here in his statement when he says God's going to fulfill what was spoken to the prophets, right? Verse 7, right? And so, there's part of the appearance of this angel suggesting God is faithful. So, who is he? Is he Michael the Archangel? Is he the angel of the Lord, if that's different than Michael the Archangel? Is he Gabriel? Right? Gabriel's name means, it could be translated either strong man of God or God is my strength. Right? And this angel is referred to as right, a mighty angel. Right? So maybe obviously we can't kind of pin it down exactly. But when John sees this angel coming down from heaven, there are a lot of things being symbolized here. All right, let's see. What else can we say about this angel? Well, John says he holds a little scroll. Now, when he says he holds a little scroll, note there that it is open. Now, what does that emphasize? What do we, when we think of a scroll being open here, there should be kind of either a contrast or comparison that you think of. We already kind of touched on. Yeah, so the first time we saw the seal, the scroll in chapter 5, it is completely sealed, right? It's sealed 7 times, but this scroll is open, right? And so the scroll, the little scroll here is not, you probably figured that out on your own, it's not the same scroll as chapter 5. Right? This is a little scroll or book. Again, remember, it could be translated either way. The other was just a scroll or a book. Of course, if this is all part of the 7th seal, remember the 7th seal opens and there are 7 trumpets, so maybe we can consider this as all part of the revelation of the 7th seal. Well, it makes sense why it's open, because the seal has been opened. But there are quite a few similarities between this scroll and the scroll of chapter 5. Here are just a couple. Both are opened, okay? There are qualities of a lion expressed in in connection with this, right? The Lion of the tribe of Judah, when he shouts, it's like the roaring of a lion. Both are similar to the scroll of Ezekiel chapter 2. When we were in Revelation 5, we talked about that. We'll look back at that passage here in a little bit when we get to John eating the book. Both cases, there is a mighty or strong angel who cries out a message. The God who lives forever and ever is discussed or described, and a scroll is taken out of someone's hand. Although, this scroll is probably in this angel's left hand. Now, why would I say it's in his left hand? It doesn't tell us that. Okay. Okay, from a practical standpoint, right? All right. Okay, I didn't think of that one, but yeah, that kind of makes sense. Why else might we say it's in his left hand? He raises his right hand to heaven, right? So if he's able to get, right, so it's kind of impractical, right? I didn't even think about it. He's got his left foot there, so. Both scrolls include discussion about the destinies of people, nations, languages. In chapter 5, it's tribes. In chapter 10 here, it's kings. But this is a special message for John. What does it contain? Well, we'll get to that here in a minute. We'll get to that when John eats it. So, as we've already kind of talked about, once the angel fully descends from heaven, he's got his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. First of all, interesting that he's able to do that. Right? He's got his foot on the sea. Right? It's not in the sea, it's on the sea. What's this suggesting? What do you pull from that when you say, okay, he's got his foot on land and foot on the sea? Right, it's suggesting kind of, I think that's right, the totality of God's sovereignty, the control, the authority that this angel has, or the authority that the message has. Right, it's over everything. And I think it's especially insightful in thinking about chapter 12, chapter 13. We'll encounter a dragon who stands on the seashore and calls forth a beast from the earth and a beast from the sea. Okay? And it's kind of already setting up, despite this dragon, despite these beasts, God's forces are in control. God is in control as well. He gives a great shout, like a lion roaring. Meant to suggest, of course, the power of the message or the power of his shout, the loudness, and all of these are kind of wrapped up here as well. But what becomes curious is what happens when he shouts. So John says, his shout is like a lion roaring. And when he shouts, the seven thunders sounded. What? When he shouted, the seven thunders sounded. So it sounds like to me that the result of the angel's shout is the sounding of seven thunders. Now, of course, we've already seen the power of thunder connected with the divine power and pronouncement, like the thunder coming from the throne in chapter 4. When the first living beast or living creature calls forth the first rider, his voice is like thunder. In chapter 19, verse 6, John refers to hearing what seems to be the voice of a great multitude that sounds like thunder. And so the voice and thunder, connected here throughout Revelation. Two other passages that are interesting in this regard as well. One from the Gospel of John. In John chapter 12 and verses 28 and 29, to get the context, some Greeks, some Gentiles come to Philip, wanting to see Jesus. Philip takes them to Andrew, and they go to Jesus, and Jesus says, now the time has come. And then he talks a little bit more about what that means, and then says, Father, glorify your name. And a voice comes from heaven and says, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. And so once that happens, the people around say, it's thunder. Right? And so they hear the voice of God, but it sounds like thunder. And they say, well, an angel has spoken to him. Right? And so this connection between angels, the voice of God, and thundering. Psalm 29 as well. It's kind of a meditation on God's voice, the power of God's voice, and what God's voice can do. And one aspect of it is that God's voice thunders. And so there's a lot of things connected with thunder and the voice of God and the voice of this angel. But in this case, the wording is slightly different. It's not a simile. Right? Now remember, similes are comparisons, use like and as. It doesn't say his shout was like seven thunders. Instead, it is when he shouted, seven thunders sounded. Now we say, okay, well, it could be a comparison, right, which is like a metaphor. Right? A metaphor is a comparison without using like or as. So it could be another one of these suggesting the power, the majesty of the pronouncement. But there's a message in the thunder. Evidently one that's comprehensible, right? Because John wants to write it down. Note as well that it says, when he shouted, the seven thunders sounded. The direct article is there. Not just the seven thunders sounded, the seven thunders, as if they are some sort of thing we're supposed to know about. Which obviously we don't. Now certainly we could probably get the other part, the seven thunders sounded, right? And so seven, the completeness, perfectness. But the fact that these are the seven thunders leaves us without an answer. Is it a comparison? Is it some sort of representation of angelic beings? Is it like the seven spirits of God? It says seven, but it means one. Right? There's a lot of things we could go here that I don't think we have a clear answer on. Nor do I think we necessarily need to know because of what happens next. John says, I was about to write. Which makes me ask, has John been writing this whole time? Right? Is he carrying around a pad of parchment and he's just been copying down? A lot of the things he's been talking about is I saw and I looked and I heard. He's not mentioned anything about writing until this point. Now again, it's a vision. Maybe it's, I don't want to say it's kind of like a dream, but you know how sometimes you jump around in dreams, and you could be driving a car and suddenly you're in the hospital bed. It just doesn't. It jumps around like that. Well, visions can do that. So he hasn't been writing, and all of a sudden he's writing. Okay, maybe that's it. Maybe he's been taking notes, acting like a reporter, so that he's prepared for recording this once it's over. But whether or not he's been writing, whatever comes out with this thunder, he wants to write down. But what happens when he starts to write down? He's told not to. In fact, he's not just don't. It doesn't say. It doesn't just say don't write it down. It says seal up what the seven thunders have said and do not write it down. Right? So there's a prohibition against writing, but there's also a prohibition of don't talk about it. And there's kind of like this idea of sealing it, as we talked about before with the seven sealed scroll, is the keeping secret, keeping it unrevealed. Passage that might be connected here would be Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4. Now, toward the end of the book of Daniel, Daniel has a lot of visions regarding events of the future. Some, I think, that are related to the arrival of Christ. I think chapter 9, the 70 weeks, that has to do with Jesus' arrival and when it would be. There's some other things that of future events. And then toward the end, I think there's some events there related to the end of time. Verse 2, right, chapter 12, many who sleep in the depths of the earth shall wake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. But note what Daniel's told in verse 4 of chapter 12. But you, Daniel, keep the word secret and the book sealed until the time of the end. And so here again we have this indication of a prophet being given some knowledge, but he is to keep it unrevealed, or to keep it protected, so that it in the case of Daniel, so that it would be revealed at the right time. But in the case of John, it's seal it up. And it doesn't appear like there's a plan for this ever to be revealed.
Does that book of Daniel also read the book that John did in Revelation?
Well, Daniel is certainly a book that there's a lot of connections with, and so maybe it's kind of helping us understand what Daniel's about by what John's seeing in his visions. That might be an option. So it would be useless to speculate what they've said. But let's speculate about why he has to seal it. Why seal it up? Why prohibit John from writing it down?
Well, my question would be, why bother even saying, oh, hey, I heard something, but I'm not going to
Yeah, that's right. I've got to see you. Yeah. Well, tell me. Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah. I mean, if you told him not to write it down, don't even talk about it, I can't tell you about it. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. Yeah, there is that kind of tempting nature to it. Now that you've told me, I want to know what they say. Why else? What else might we think about why they're sealed? Why the information sealed? Ultimately, we can say what about the fact that it's sealed? Okay, well, yeah, I mean, there's something important going on, but also, by sealing it, what is God saying? It's not, God doesn't want that particular information revealed. And so that's definitely part of, why it's sealed. Is it that God has changed his mind about something, right? The seven thunders announced something and God has changed his mind, canceled the punishment that maybe the seven thunders announced. We do know God changes his mind, He wants to destroy the Israelites who have created the golden calf, but Moses steps in for them and convinces God not to do that. Jeremiah 18 talks about, if he decrees punishment for a nation and the nation repents, he will repent of that punishment in the sense of he's not going to do it. If he promises good things for a nation and the nation becomes wicked, he'll take back those good things and send punishment. So God does change his mind. But again, why bring it up in the first place? Go ahead, Tom.
This is sharing about people. When he shouted, the seven thunders sounded. Maybe if he sounded himself, it wouldn't have been, he might have been a different outcome. Maybe he had to have them to sound off.
Yeah.
And then just go through the act of, hey, it could have been this, but I'm going to let them.
Yeah, there was one plan, but something has changed that, and that's why it's the thunder's announcing it versus the angel announcing it. Maybe like Daniel, it is to be delayed, and so maybe that's what it is. But even if it's delayed, why not reveal it anyway? And just kind of say, seal it up until the appropriate time. So again, there's something God is prohibiting us from knowing, which is not unusual. We don't know a lot of things. God keeps a lot of things. Daniel 29:29 says the secret things belong to God. So there are a lot of things we don't know. And so John is prohibited from revealing this message. Then, after all that, the angel raises his right hand to heaven. What's the significance of him raising his right hand? What's he doing?
With his, to symbolize power and authority.
Okay, maybe power and authority. What else might be symbolized here?
God's granting him power.
Okay, that might be it too. I think it has more to do with what he does next.
Pledge.
Right, so it has this idea of swearing an oath, pledging something, right? So it's kind of like what you have to do when you become a witness, right? You take the oath and you raise your right hand, those kind of things. And in this case, this angel is swearing, again, in the context of an oath, not using bad language, obviously. He is swearing this oath, which means that what is coming next is certain, it's assurance, it's something truthful. And the truthfulness, the assurance, the certainty is based on the fact that he's swearing by God.